Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Samuels, Director of Alumni Programs for the Albany Alumni Association. Welcome to today's program, 3 Steps to Interviewing and Hiring Right. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording today's session, and I will send you a link to that recording within the next couple of days in case there's anything you want to refer back to. We will also be saving time at the end of the program for Q&A. So if you have questions for our presenter, please put those into the Q&A and not the chat. They're likely to get overlooked in the chat. So let's get started. I want to share a little bit about our speaker today. Andrea Hoffer is class of 91 and 93. She is the founder and CEO of AHA Recruiting Experts. Andrea is an expert consultant, trainer, facilitator, recruiter, and entrepreneur with extensive experience in small business management and franchising. She has a passion for learning about what motivates others and a passion for helping others to achieve their goals. So I'm very pleased to have Andrea join us. Hi, good to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me, Melissa. I'm so excited.
Yeah, very excited to have you with us today. And I'm going to actually hop off and turn things over to you. I'll see you towards the end of the program.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen so that we can get started. Thank you to everybody who is here today. It's fun to be talking to Albany alumni. Let's see, where is the start button here? Why am I having? Okay, so hiring. Hiring can be exhausting. It can be overwhelming. It can be disappointing. And, you know, if you agree with this, please just put a comment in the chat, because I love to, I can't see the chat while I'm speaking, but afterwards I love to read people's comments. So one of the things that I always like to ask is, why is this true? Why is hiring so overwhelming and exhausting? So if you have some ideas, put that in the chat. It's the things that we normally hear from our clients is either there aren't enough qualified people who are interested in their job, or too many unqualified applications that it takes so long to get through and you just don't have time to screen all of them. Or the candidates don't always show us who they truly are during the interview. And then also one thing that comes up a lot with our clients is they come to us because they're afraid of making the wrong decision, because that wrong decision can mean a huge negative impact on their business and just on their daily life. How many of you feel that way? You can share that in the chat. So what we're going to talk about today is a formula to figuring out the best way to hire the best people for your jobs. Now, there is no perfect formula, but if you have a good process in place, you're going to get at least 80 to 90% there. If you don't have a good process and you're doing things kind of haphazardly, you might get there. You know, you might find this perfect person, and that's great, but you're not going to consistently continue to find the right people for your job and your culture. So are you ready to start to discuss our steps? So we have 3 steps that you can take. And the first one is a step that I see a lot of employers skip, and we have to kind of backtrack them. And that's really getting an idea of who you need, not just what experience they've had. Do they have the skills to do the job? Usually, you know, that's a given. But who's the right fit for your culture? What are the success traits that are going to make them very successful in this position for your specific needs? Everybody's going to view the same position title differently. The next step, and we're going to go through each one of these. And the next step is then taking that information and developing a recruitment plan. And that doesn't mean taking a job description and just throwing it out there on Indeed or one of the job boards. That's not going to get you who you want. It's creating marketing pieces that really speak to the person you're looking for, and then putting it out there where the people who you're looking for will find it. So we'll talk to that a little bit today, and I even have a free giveaway to help you to do that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about our third step, which is building the screening process. And we're going to really focus in on how to create a good, effective interview question, and then some of the things to listen for. And of course, once you have these three steps, then you need to go out and execute. So are you ready? The first step is discovery. So I mentioned that this is the step that a lot of employers either skip or just sort of brush over a little. And this first step, I'm going to just read this slide because I think it really encapsulates what we're looking for. This first step to hiring right involves learning more about what you as employer bring to the table, because you got to realize you're selling a position to somebody as well, and what you expect from the employees in return. So it's very important to grill down to what those pieces look like. And if you don't do this work first, it would be very difficult to not only find the right people, but to actually recognize them when you see them, and recognize that they're not the right fit or they are the right fit. So in order to do this, I wanted to go through a series of questions. And we'll talk about each one a little bit today. And then that little free kit that I talked about that I will be giving to you is going to give you more questions to ask yourself, some exercises to do to really get a good feel for what your needs are. So the first one is, why does this position even exist? Now, I often hear, well, because we're overwhelmed with work, we need another person. Well, that's I'm sure very true. You really need to know, how is this person going to contribute to your mission? What is your mission overall as a company, and what's this person's role? So typically we have this sort of questionnaire form where we put the job title, we put the job purpose, which is the reason the position exists. And it doesn't have to be anything very elaborate. This is mainly for you, and also so that you can communicate to the person that's going to be in the role why the position exists. And then we usually like to have right within that same section, what's the organization's mission? Because you want to show how that job contributes to that mission. So you can see a couple of examples here. Account manager, to ensure clients' expectations are exceeded. Very simple. Job purpose. If the client's expectations are exceeded, then the company is probably doing well and meeting their mission, which is to help companies use internet marketing and sales technology to scale fast or to scale quickly. This isn't, again, it's not rocket science. It's just very basic. You want to drill it down so that people understand what their role is. And here's one that we actually used when I owned my spa. Membership associate. The job's purpose had a little bit of a dual role. It was to educate on the benefits of massage therapy, but it also was to sell our memberships, because we were membership based, and of course other services and retail. But we really saw if they were doing their job of educating about the benefits of massage therapy, then that second part would just come as second nature. And then our mission was to help people heal, relax, and relieve stress. So you can really see how that position feeds into that mission. The next part, and again, we're going through these fairly quickly, but this is to give you a bite size of some of the things that you need to do to discover about your organization. The skills and experience part, that's usually a slam dunk. That's usually, in most cases, employers know this. They know what experience they're looking for. They know what technical skills are needed. It's often fairly easy to test for certain skills. And, sometimes they don't even need those skills. It's just, they can be very easily taught. So we just very briefly, put what skills we're looking for that they need to have in order to do the job, and the type of experience we're looking for. So for this example, an executive assistant, you can see the skills, and we were looking for a minimum of 4 to 6 years supporting a busy executive or project, because we knew for this position, because this is actually taken from one of the roles we just filled, that the CEO was an extremely busy person, and she needed someone who was, has had experience in assisting somebody who had a lot of projects going on. The next, and I often see this one employers struggling with, but it's very, very important. What are the results? What are the outcomes that you're expecting to get from this position? It's not just getting a whole list of tasks off your plate. There's something that by doing these tasks, by doing them effectively, there's going to be certain results that you're looking for. And you want to define that as much as possible. And, when you are interviewing, and we'll get to that in a little bit, you want to listen for the results that your candidates have accomplished in the past using the skills that they're saying they have. So in order to recognize that they're sharing stories that, hey, if that was done at your organization, you would just be thrilled, then you really need to know what are the results you're looking for from this position, and how are you going to measure the results. One of our questions that you'll see on the worksheet we're going to give you later is, in 90 days, what would have happened? What would have been accomplished that you would be giving the person in this role a very good score on their performance review, that they just had an excellent performance review because they hit all the marks that you are looking for? And that's a really great place to start when you're trying to figure out who you need and what you're looking for. And, can these things be easily observed? And try to get as specific as possible. And so here's a very basic example: account manager. The main purpose of the account manager was client retention. So the outcome is to achieve a monthly retention goal. And they do this by strengthening relationship with clients with weekly client updates and needs assessments. It's broad. You can then get more detailed underneath. And the metric that they're going to use is that they want to see that 85% of their client base is being retained from 1 year to the next. So it's very clear what's expected of this person. Okay. And then the next part of our discovery process is, what are the specific traits? We like to call them success traits. They're action phrases that can be either observed or measured. They're how you want this person to show up every day. And we do a lot of digging with our clients, and the discovery exercises I'm going to be sharing with you will help you to do this. But we then take it and we use a copyright for this, but you can do this on your own. And we put it in the job posting, because we want it be as clear as possible in the job posting of who could be successful in this position, how they show up every day. What are the traits that people who have been in the position in the past who have been successful, what are the traits they had that made them successful? So here's one right from a job posting we did for that executive position, executive assistant position I was talking about earlier. And I just took 3 of them. Usually we have anywhere from 4 to 6 success traits on the posting. And, you can see they're all very, they're action oriented. And then there is a sentence or two that describes what we mean by that, so that it really becomes clear to the person what we're looking for. So they wanted somebody who prepared ahead. And what did that mean to the CEO? That meant that they are always looking ahead to make sure the CEO was ready for her next meeting, and even her meeting 2 weeks from now. And they looked, as deep as possible into things for any missing details, so that this CEO was always ready for anything that was going to be thrown at her. So they wanted to make that very clear, that this was a very important part of this role. And so this was a success trait that we needed, somebody who could plan ahead in that manner. So I'm not going to go through all 3 traits there, but you're always welcome to the slides. I don't know if Melissa is going to be sharing them afterwards, but I can send them to you if you reach out to me. And the next part, and let me just move this section here because I can't see, are the specific behaviors that fit your organizational culture. Now, there's a difference between the success traits that we were talking about that's specific to the position and your core values of your organization. I wish I could see your hands, but why don't you just raise your hands if you actually have core values for your organization that are written down, that are lived every day in your organization. This is something, I can see all the different hands raised. This is great. I'm so used to doing this in person. And I apologize for my dog barking in the back. He loves to do that whenever I'm speaking. So core values are so important. This is the way that you operate as an organization. It's something that is ingrained in all of your team members, and you can count on. It's very difficult to teach if somebody doesn't actually truly believe in each value. So I listed our core values for AHA below, and I know that every member of my team truly lives these core values. And so, for example, one of them is innovative. And, my team actually makes fun of me sometimes because I just love technology. I love it and hate it, I should say. And I'm always looking for new and better ways for us to be able to do what we do with technology. And what I love about my team is they find that to be very exciting and motivating. And they actually come up with, new ways of approaching things to make our job better and better for our clients. And so now, if I had hired people on my team who weren't very innovative and were afraid of change, then they would not be happy in our organization. So we make that very clear as we're going through the hiring process. And we, of course, keep that in mind as we're interviewing people, to hear from them that innovation is important to them and that it's something that motivates them. Okay, let's go to the next. So another thing to really know, and sometimes we lie to ourselves, right? Like we don't truly know. And the only way we know is if we talk to our team members, and especially talk to the ones who leave us. And the ones who stay. I mean, they're both extremely important. You want to know what is the reason they're staying with you, because then you want to promote that aspect of it when you're hiring, and you also want to do more of it if that's what makes people stay at your organization. But also, why are they leaving? And I want to focus on that aspect. One of the things that we always ask our clients when we're first working with them, we talk about their turnover, and we ask, why do people leave? And sometimes it's, why did they leave from this particular position that they're trying to fill, or why did they leave from the organization as a whole? And you want to be upfront about these things. So if the job requires a lot of long hours or a lot of weekends, or it's very fast paced and can be a little chaotic at times, you want to be upfront about that in the job posting, and also when you're speaking with the candidates. Now, I'm not saying to be negative in how you present it. I'm just saying to be straightforward. We're very fast paced. We're a growing organization. We're always bringing new technology in. So the right person is someone who's going to thrive in that. And there are people who do thrive in that, and there are other people who it doesn't fit for them. So you want to be very clear about that for you, and then as you are talking with potential candidates. So we've gone through quickly the discovery process. And what I would like to invite you all to do is you can either take out your cell phones and go to the QR code, or I put the URL on top, and I think Melissa might put it in the chat, which is ahahiringtools.com. And that will bring you to a landing page to get our job posting kit. It's how to create an irresistible job posting. So it includes the discovery exercises that I just mentioned a few times in going through those questions. But the questions are a little bit deeper. It's going to ask you things like, how do you think of your best team member, and think about something they did that it just clicked for you, that they're amazing and you'd like 10 more of them, and to write that story down. So things like, so I really encourage you to do these exercises and to hold on to them, because they're going to be very helpful as you evaluate people and as you write your interview questions. And we're going to get to that part in a moment. So, and then also this kit includes, once you do the exercises, a lot of people skip it, but once you do the exercises, there's actually a job posting wizard. And so you just go in and you answer questions that it gives you, and it will then email you in job posting form your job posting. You'll probably have to, just sort of review it, proof it, but it will give you a good place to start. And so that's part of the whole recruitment part, is really getting some good job postings, marketing thoughts on how you can present yourself as an employer of choice. If we had more time, I would go more into the recruitment marketing part of it, but I think that kit is really going to help you with a good starting place. And what I wanted to spend some time on now is the screening process, because this is where I tend to get a lot of questions. So we're going to walk through our formula for creating a great interview question. And, you'll find it is slightly different than maybe what you've been taught in the past. And I'll go through the reasons for each part of it. So here we go. Most of our interview questions start with, could you share? Could you tell us? And the reason for this is because there's a very psychological piece of, if you start a question with could you, instead of the more directive type questions that start with tell me or describe or explain, those are very directive, and it gives in the subconscious, it gives the candidate the thought that they don't have a choice, they don't have control, and it puts their defenses up. And what you want to do is make the candidate as comfortable as possible. I know for me, like when I first learned interviewing, I was kind of, taught to be a little more strict, and, we want to get them on the defensive and we want to grill them, but that's not what really is going to get to the heart of who they truly are. You want to make them so comfortable that they drop their defenses and they share things with you that they don't even realize later that they didn't want to share with you. And I'm not saying they're deep, dark secrets, but they start just sharing more, so you get a much better feel of who they are and how they're going to show up on your job. So just by starting questions with could you share, it makes them feel like they have an element of control, and that just helps build into that comfort level. So this is the first part. So very simple. Could you share? The next part is a specific example of. This is your power phrase, specific example. So most of our interview questions always include both of those words, and I'm drilling it in because it's very important. Specific example. The more you ask candidates for specific examples, you're going to learn a couple of things, and we'll talk about what's next in a minute. But you want to get details from them about their past experience, not just their experience, but how they showed up in that experience. So the next part after a specific example is going to be some situation that is very relatable to your position. And we'll go into that. But the more you ask for a specific example and probe and get details, the more you're going to learn about how they show up in lots of different situations that are very similar to the situations they would be involved in if you were to hire them. And if you start to ask a lot of questions saying specific example, but you're getting very vague answers and not details, then that could be a red flag. And we're gonna touch on that in a minute as well. So I can't push enough. Make sure if you get nothing else out of this, use that phrase in your questions. So the next part, we're going to go through a couple of examples so you can understand how to create your questions in that middle section. Because so far it's very easy, right? Could you share a specific example of? Slam dunk, half your questions already done. Now here's the part where you need to do a little bit of work. You need to first figure out, well, what do I want to know about? Well, here's a success trait. We need someone, say it's for a position, who really takes ownership of circumstances, that we're not going to have to keep telling them to do this or they pass it off, that they take ownership and feel responsible for it. So we said, could you share a specific example of a time at work where it wasn't clear who was responsible for a certain task? So what this is going to tell us is, does this person jump in and look for a solution, or do they pass the buck? Do they start to describe an actual specific example where they told us the situation, they explained why it wasn't clear who was responsible and how they filled that void? Or they're going to start to complain. Or they'll just talk vaguely of, oh, in that type of situation, somebody will figure it out, or I always step in. Well, great. I love that you always step in. Could you share a specific example when that has happened? So you always want to probe to get as many details as possible. Another example. Oh, hold on. Oh, I thought I had another example. So now we're talking about probing. Here, there are lots of ways to probe. The very important part is not giving away the answer. And what do I say by that? If you ask somebody, let's see, if we go back to this question and you ask them a specific example of a time at work where it wasn't clear who was responsible for a certain task, and then you said, and how did you handle it? Or in how did you deal with it? Or how did you make it right? You're giving away the answer. You're telling them you want a positive response. And most people can come up with something. But if you leave questions hanging, then it kind of opens it up so that the people who are more problem makers, who don't take ownership or who just kind of pass the buck, they are going to share more of how they actually show up. Whereas the problem solvers are going to go into specific details about how they've solved these type of situations or how they brought solutions to make this happen. Now, is the perfect candidate going to answer all of these questions perfectly 100% of the time? No, you're looking for a pattern of at least 80 to 85% where they're sharing specific details that match what you're looking for. So some examples of how to probe, walk me through what happened. What happened next? Melissa, I see that you've raised your hand. Did you want me to stop for a moment? No, okay, you took your hand down, so I'm assuming that means no. So probing for details. What I love the question, what does that look like to you? And that comes up a lot for me when I'm interviewing, because somebody will say something in an interview, and I'm saying we as all interviewers and employers, we so badly want the right person, right? We need to fill the position. And they'll say something that sometimes we make an assumption that what they're sharing is exactly what we want to hear. But if we follow up with, can you expand on that? What does that look like to you? It gives us more of a view of what they're really talking about, because they may be using very vague terms that we think sound great. Oh, I'm the best customer service person. I'm always going above and beyond for all my clients. Great. Could you share a specific example for me that really tells me what that looks like to you, going above and beyond? So don't take things at face value. Get as many details as you possibly can. So, and here, this is, I've started to touch on this. Don't be swayed by the hypotheticals. And that's what I was kind of talking about before. High performers are going to have details to share with you. It is very difficult to lie in details. So the low performers won't really have a lot of details. They'll have they might say, you should do this. Or a lot of times they may use we. Now, we can be a little tricky, because we are taught to use we, to talk, to say we're part of a team. And most of us believe that, it takes teamwork to get things done. So often during an interview, somebody might say, we did this and we did that and we accomplished this. I always give them permission to say I always say, what, I think it's wonderful that you're saying we and that you're team oriented. We're team oriented here as well. And I so appreciate that. This is an interview. And in order for me to really understand if you're the right fit for a position, it's important for me to know what actions you individually took and how that fits in to the situation. So I'm giving you permission to say I. And they usually laugh at that. And so it actually even makes them more comfortable. And then sometimes the next question, they start to say we, and then they stop themselves and say, oh, I'm sorry, and say I. So it actually really makes things flow even better. But you have to give them permission. Don't just assume if they're using we, then they didn't actually take a role in solving things. You just need to let them know it's okay for them to toot their own horn, because they need to in an interview. Okay, so now you have your question and you're listening, you're asking for examples. Now you want to put down on your rating sheet car. So I'd usually write in the margin, or we have, formatted sheet, CAR. So C is for context. We're going to go through each one. A is for actions, and R is for results. The context is you want to really understand the situation, because in order to understand how the candidate showed up and really worked in a certain situation, and did they find solutions, you have to understand how did it come about, what exactly was going on. And so just get as much about the context of the situation as you can. So here are a couple of questions to help you. How did the problem start, or how did you become aware of the problem? And once you have a feel for the context, then you want to get into the actions. Walk me through your actions. So you want to make sure you understand the situation and you understand the steps that they specifically took. And lastly, what were the end results, or what did they learn? So sometimes the end results could be not great. It could be, it wasn't exactly the end that the candidate would have wanted or their boss would have wanted. But that doesn't mean that they're a bad candidate if they then share, but here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do differently to prevent this from happening again. Here's how I changed the process so that we don't have this mistake again. So you just want to make sure you get those three pieces, the context, the actions of the candidate, and the results. So I went through this very quickly, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I always like to end with this quote by Simon Sinek, which is, if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, and this gets to those core values, they will work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. And this is so true. I see it every day. And that's why I always like to include that quote. So thank you so much. Here's my information if you'd like to reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So folks, if you do have some questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. Andrea, if you want to maybe, yep, that's great. I did receive a few questions beforehand during the registration process, so I'll start with those while other folks are perhaps adding some to the Q&A. So one question was, how do I combat implicit bias in the interview and hiring process?
So is the implicit bias for that, I'll answer it two different ways.
I interpreted that as the person who's doing the hiring or managing it is concerned about his or her own implicit bias or colleagues' implicit bias.
Yeah, and I think the person who asked that question is amazing for asking it. And I ask myself that question every day. And I don't have, an amazing answer for you, except for to keep educating yourself. So what I do is I read all the best information I can find on the different ways biases can show up in an interview, or even biases could show up every day. And I try to be aware of it and share it with my team. We bring in speakers who specialize in different, types of biases so that we're aware. I just learned, I had a speaker the other day who was teaching me about the hearing impaired. And, one of the things she said to me was, if somebody is 100% can't hear, they don't like the word hearing impaired. They want it's deaf, that they're deaf. And so it's also interesting learning the terminology, but then ways to also make the interviews doable for everybody. Everybody has different things that could make it more difficult. So I don't have one perfect answer, except for I think it's something we all have to continue to educate ourselves about, and to do the best we can with it, and to educate our team.
Yes, I was going to say, and it sounds like you're saying that the hiring manager who's ever running point on that needs to take responsibility for perhaps educating and sharing some information with anybody that's going to be involved in the interview process.
And I would bring experts in. I'm not an expert in that specific, so we bring experts in that talk about techniques to use and ways to know if you have a bias that could be interfering with your hiring decision, or even just in how you work with your team.
Yeah, and great if someone has the resources to do that. If not, I wonder if maybe we could find some resources to share with the group after the fact. So I'll talk with Andrea and see if we can find some resources that she's used and share that with everyone after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some warning signs when interviewing a candidate?
One thing I touched on, which is a big warning sign, is if the candidate is very vague in their answers and they're just throwing at you a lot of the terms that they could just get off the internet, that they think it's what you want to hear. sometimes when I do a talk like this, I start with, have you ever interviewed someone who said all the right things and then you hire them and 2 weeks later they're an imposter, right? They're not the person you hired. And that's because if you go back, and I always ask people, if you have the transcript from that interview or your notes, go back and look. Did they actually share details of things that they've done in the past? Or were they just saying all those catchphrases above and beyond? I love that one. That always is a red flag to me. Or you should. Hearing you should a lot is a red flag.
Red flag. Okay, great. Here's a question from Lisa. What advice can you offer to attract more women and minorities to apply for a position in traditionally male-dominated fields such as IT?
The first thing is take a look at your job posting. There are actually a lot of free resources out there, and even your job description that you can run it through. And I can, if you remind Melissa, I can share some of those links later. I just don't have them at my fingertips. Where if you run through the job description and the job posting in these sites, it will actually tell you if you're using language that's very gender specific, or if it's language, and sometimes it's you have no idea, right? And so it's great to use these tools. So we'll say, you might be turning people off who are women, or you might be turning people off who fall within this, this culture. So it's great to use those tools so that you're really talking to everyone. And then there are specific ways you can target people. We have certain software where if we want to make sure we source all different jobs. And so our software helps us source, but we can also do a separate search just for women who have the qualifications we're looking for, or just for people who the software thinks. Now, sometimes it's not always perfect in how it identifies people. They actually, what it will do, and you can do this without having the software, is it will look for affiliations. So if you want more women, then look for affiliations that are women related who also have the skills that you're looking for, the background you're looking for, and target them. Don't just put an ad out. Yeah, you're probably going to get a lot of men if all you do is put an ad out. You want to reach out to them and say, we're looking for somebody with your skill set, and here's what we're all about. Is this something that would attract you? Especially in this job market now, and I didn't mention this earlier, but the only way we're really finding successful candidates is by sourcing them. And sourcing is, we do post, but it's very rare we get somebody through a job posting. We're going through LinkedIn and a lot of paid databases, but LinkedIn's a great one where we're looking for people who have the skill set, the experience, and we're reaching out to them, telling them about the culture of the company we're recruiting for and about the opportunities available, and asking them, is this something you'd like to learn more about? Now, they still have to go through the screening process. That doesn't mean they get a pass, but we're essentially selling them the opportunity.
Interesting. All right. Here's another question. Any recommendations about what to ask or not ask when calling someone's references?
So we actually changed the way we do references about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, and we don't actually call them. We use an online system called Skill Survey, and there are other tools out there. But what we found is when we were calling references, first of all, it is so time consuming, and it is very difficult to get people on the phone, and also when they're on the phone for them to be truthful with you. So what we do is we have the candidate, and this actually puts the work on the candidate, where they go into the system and they enter the references, emails and phone numbers and everything in there. And then the reference receives a survey to fill out online. And we get much better responses that way, because it's anonymous. Now, if we usually require a minimum of 3 references, and what comes back is the 3 references that filled it out and their comments, and I'll tell you how it's set up in a minute, but it doesn't tell us who said what. So there's no way anybody could take legal action, and we find we get much better feedback that way. And also it's very job related. So it goes through a whole bunch of questions specific to the job, asking the reference to rate their skills in each area. And so it gets the reference really thinking about, this person related to this job that you're hiring for. And then there are 2 open-ended questions where they, we really encourage them to put comments so they can support their answers. But it's very helpful because we can see, oh, they scored very low on this particular skill. If that skill is, very important for this job, or the even success trait, then, but they said, oh, there's a very dedicated person, they're hardworking, they never call out. Well, great, but can they really do the job is what we want to know, as well as their work ethic.
Right, just a couple more. This is an interesting question. Do you recommend a rating system for evaluating interviewees?
I do. You just be careful with it. So there are different approaches to the rating system. The guru I follow a lot with interviewing is Mark Murphy, and he's very good. He has a strong background in how to do different type of research. If you want to read a great book on, first of all, I'm writing a book and will be out next year, but if right now you want to read a book that it's very easy to read, is by Mark Murphy. It's called Hiring for Attitude. I always keep it on my desk. He will talk a lot about a rating system, and he always uses 1 to 7, and there's a scientific reason behind it. And so he can, I recommend the book because on the details of that. But what we do is we go through and we actually use the job posting as the beginning of our rating system. So if we did the job posting right, which is the first thing we really focus on, then that job posting should essentially give us the answers to the interview, right? So if we're listing out the most important success traits and actually describing in a couple of sentences what that looks like, then we're going through and seeing, okay, they shared this example, say it was for an executive assistant, and they talked about how, well, I'll tell you, we did an interview a few months ago, and this person talked about how the executive she supports is an IT leader and is very detail oriented, but it was very slow paced. And the more we spoke with her, the more she talked about that. And we saw that's what she was looking for. Someone she could assist, but, slow pace. So that told us that for the fast pace supporting a busy CEO, she rated very low because that wasn't what she wanted. It's not what she was used to. And she actually ended up dropping out because we made it. And that's, to me, is gold. If during the interview you make it so clear what the job is about that they either get really excited and can't wait to move on, or they say, you know what, this isn't for me, then I always say, that's, thank you for sharing and good luck. And if we have something that is for you, we'll let you know. But as far as the one, the actual rating system, I would look up Mark Murphy and the Hiring for Attitude. He can talk a lot better about that.
All right, last question. What do you recommend in terms of giving constructive feedback to a candidate that's not selected for a position, a final candidate that's not selected for a position?
Okay, I would be extremely careful and always tie it specifically to the job. So if you hired someone who had more experience, we can take the example I just shared. If you hire someone who had a lot of experience supporting a fast-paced CEO, and that's what the job required, and somebody who didn't get the job asked, and they, in in talking with them that wasn't their experience, I would just focus on that one thing. Don't go into a lot of different details, but make sure it's very specific to the needs of the job, and the reason why they weren't the right fit in that way. But again, some of these things also you want to talk to an employee attorney about. I'm not an attorney.
Right.
We use best
Right.
practices, but sometimes, you know, every state has different laws related to it.
Proceed with caution. Okay. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. So, Andrea, I want to thank you so much. This was really interesting. I'm in my own job sometimes involved in the hiring process, and I definitely have a few tips that I'm taking away today. So thank you to everyone who joined us. I'm glad you were able to be here. I will be following up with an email with some links to some of the resources that Andrea was talking about, as well as her contact information if you want to reach out. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.